Welcome to Pathways, Becoming Trauma Responsive, where we explore trauma through a compassionate lens, discover how these experiences affect each of us differently, and dive deeper into what it really means to become more trauma-informed. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Meeker, Senior Director of the New York State Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center, funded by the New York State Office of Mental Health. The network advances the collective understanding of trauma, wellness and healing, and trauma-informed practices in action. This podcast is produced by CCSI. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the New York State Office of Mental Health or CCSI. Tom, it's exciting to welcome you to Pathways, our podcast for the Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center. We're excited to have you here today, and also as one of our Legacy Advisory Council members as well. So I was hoping you could start off by just introducing yourself.
Sure, yes, and thank you so much for having me. I am Tom Andriola. I am currently working for the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, Office of Youth Justice. I've been in state government for, over 26 years now. And during that tenure is when some of the things started to come out for me in terms of trauma I experienced as a child. So it's interesting because, I started my career in government not really realizing the impact that it had had on me. And, I think probably somewhere in my late 20s is when I felt this urge to get help for myself, because I felt this pit in my stomach that, that something was wrong. And I just didn't really understand what it was. So I, for the first time, I think at the age of 29, I went to get some help for primarily for being abused sexually as a child, mostly at the age of 11. So really a long time after that had occurred, it really started coming out. And that really sent me on my quest, not only to get help for myself, but to figure out how to try to heal and ultimately how to help others in this work.
Thank you for sharing that. And, it is very apparent to me that this work is, not just important to you professionally, but obviously very important to you personally as well. It sounds like given your experiences growing up. And I'm curious, when you think about the importance of trauma-informed work, what is that why that really drives you to your commitment to promoting these practices?
Yeah, I think basically just by kind of going through my own experience of not understanding the impact that some early experiences were having on me as an adult, starting to get help for that, and then kind of feeling like everything was lost, that it was that the days were dark and they were going to stay dark. But coming out the other side of that, eventually after some hard work, I think made me realize that, I think, I have an obligation to help others because, I was in a spot myself where I was contemplating suicide. I didn't feel right about myself. I had a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and was eventually able to work through all of that and come out the other side to an even better life. So to me, the importance of this work is really trying to help others get to that point as well when they feel that all is lost and they feel that there's no hope and there's nothing that can be done to get them better. Um, I want to be there as somebody that can show them, yes, it can, because I was there too.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have deep empathy and compassion for people who are going through their individual journey. And, I think about that. And then also kind of your role in state government and systems, and thinking about the people who then intersect with systems as they're going through their healing process. And I'm curious about how that has, that intersection kind of has shown up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think early on, and I've been doing juvenile justice reform work since late 2011. So that's been my longest stint in state government in doing that work. So 13 years roughly, about half of my tenure in state government, and right away, it was important to me to try to integrate a trauma informed lens into the work that we do on behalf of youth who are at risk or are involved in the juvenile justice system, because there's always underlying reasons for that. They didn't just wake up one day and decide, that they want to go and do something and get caught up in the system. There are often underlying causes for that, and trauma is a big one. I've worked since that time to try to integrate a trauma informed approach. As you mentioned before, becoming a legacy member of the New York State Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center Advisory Council. But also, I was able to secure some funding to develop a New York State Trauma Champions Collaborative in 2019. And that collaborative was really intended to work among state agency professionals to try to integrate a trauma informed approach into all of the work that we do. So we were able to get more than a dozen state agencies to participate, more than 30 professional individuals. And the idea really is, how can we ask others to integrate a trauma informed approach in the field if we're not doing it ourselves? So that was the idea of it. It's still there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of progress to be made, but I think we're making a sincere effort to try to do that at the state level as well.
That's really exciting to hear. And, I'm curious, it's been about 5 years now that that group has been working on this. And I'm wondering what changes or shifts that you've seen over the past 5 years, knowing that there's, we always talk about it being a journey, there's always more to do, but, kind of what gains have been made from your perspective.
I think it differs by state agency. It really has depended on the leadership of each individual agency. I know when the current governor came in, she did give a directive really that she didn't want any sort of toxic environment playing out in any aspect of state government, um, which is a lofty goal, because we
Hmm.
all know that there are probably more than 100 state agencies, more than 100,000 state employees. And so you're going to have people in there in supervisory roles who are not necessarily being trauma informed and trauma responsive. So it's a big task. Um, it does require the buy-in of
Hmm.
leadership and supervisors. I think there has been more progress in agencies where that has been the case than in others. Um, so there's a long way to go. I'll leave it at that for
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think what you were bringing up just about addressing toxic environments, really also just speaks to the fact that this work is so important, not only for the people that are being served, but for the people who show up and to do the work every day, and that they're also experiencing these same values and action, in their day-to-day experience. Because I think about you, and I appreciate you so much sharing your personal story, because it's a reminder that we all come with our history, right? And so to this work, and we don't know who's in front of us or what they might have experienced, and why it's so important to work towards creating safe, nurturing environments for our employees and our staff and our coworkers and our colleagues, so that they can do the best work they can do.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, it was a ways into my tenure in state government before, not only before I got help for myself, but
Hmm.
even once I started to get help, the dark days that followed that,
Right.
because when you bring up all of these memories and you're working to process them so that you can come out healthier on the other side.
Hmm.
It doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't
Right.
happen in a straight line. In many ways, experienced I experienced larger reactions, I guess, to some triggers that would maybe set me off.
Hmm.
And you don't really have the luxury when you're working 7, 8 hour days or whatever it may be
Hmm.
to just sit there and stare into space, as happens quite often when you're in the midst of trying to work on your the impacts of your own trauma.
Right.
So um, you know there are times when I'd have to force myself to kind of get get present in the room.
Hmm.
Times when there might be a trigger, and I would have to make sure that I tried to control my reaction to that,
Hmm.
and step out if I needed to, or whatever. But it's not always easy to do that, especially if you haven't processed
Right.
those memories and processed the trauma that you had experienced. So everybody's going through different phases of their own journeys,
Right.
and I may be through mine for the most part, but there are some who haven't even faced it yet, and there are some who are in the dark days, and there are others who just started getting help.
Yep.
And I think taking that trauma informed approach, and trying to understand that, and trying to uh, listen to people and empathize with them along the way, is very helpful and makes this work so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, for you personally, you shared some of the strategies that you use to kind of help manage some of the, when you might been in a situation where you felt activated. I'm curious, was there anything, even if you didn't share what was going on with others, that people did that were helpful, like, specific things, maybe from supervisors or colleagues that helped you during that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you know people sort of gave me my space, and maybe it was the work environment I was in.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of my government career, I was with the Assembly Ways and Means Committee,
Mm-hmm.
and so the job there was intense, and we had to be around for well more than 8 hours a day, during legislative session and during budget making and negotiations and all of that. So even though we were there all those hours, there was always some downtime during the day, where I'd be able to at least have my space to go take a walk,
Mm-hmm.
um, step outside for a few minutes, whatever the case may be. And I think everybody was really afforded that space. in the situation that I was
Mm-hmm.
in. So
Yeah.
I guess I was kind of lucky in that regard.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't like a compressed schedule where you're there, you're at a job for 8 hours and you need to be
Right.
performing for that full 8 hours.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it was kind of waiting around, waiting for
Mm-hmm.
the elected officials to come back from wherever they were or to get through committee meetings and bring something back. And then when the work picked up, it was all in, and there was nothing else to really focus on.
Right.
So it was either we're waiting around, we have time to
Mm-hmm.
kind of uh, do what
Mm-hmm.
we need and have some space, and then the other parts where it was intense, like if we were in a floor debate or at a committee meeting defending a bill, your mind is really
Right.
focused on that alone. So there wasn't really opportunity to let this other stuff kind of play into it. So I guess I was fortunate in that way.
Yeah, so it sounds like the nature of the work kind of lended itself, but I'm also hearing there wasn't necessarily things that were kind of maybe intentionally built in from a trauma-informed perspective. And this is early days. I understand like where that might have been helpful for you or someone else. But so now I'm like, kind of turning the page and looking forward and saying like, what was accomplished in the first, kind of 5 years of the trauma champion group. And if you could advance and, we're 5 years down in the future, what are some of your hopes of kind of some of the gains that you could see being made, in kind of state government or in other organizations that you work with? Because I know you intersect with a lot of other organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really across the board. When we first when we first finished the learning phase of the Trauma Champions Collaborative, everybody was very excited to kind of stay together because the
Hmm.
initial phase, the learning phase, was a 5 month process in 2019, and everybody that was involved in it wanted to stay and continue to meet and work together and all of that. And one of the first things we did was to put together a vision and a mission.
Hmm.
And really, the vision was pretty simple, that New York State integrates a trauma informed approach into all aspects of its work. So it's huge. And it really means not only state agencies, but all the agencies that we
Right.
work with in the field and everywhere within New York State, that would be the case. So we've made some gains. Early on, we pulled together a comprehensive list of various resources for folks to tap into, that may want to become trauma informed as an
Hmm.
organization or as an individual. We have those posted on the New York State Trauma Informed Network and Resource Center website. So that was a big win for us. We also put together an executive level presentation that we've used with some agency leadership in the past few years. Not as much as I would like,
Hmm.
but some. And you know, really to make the pitch of why do what's in it for you actually
Right.
to become trauma informed, and a lot of the big ticket items are less absenteeism,
Hmm.
more creativity, uh, buy-in from staff members, all sorts of things, and they may or may not realize why that's the case based on their point in their own journeys, but we thought that was important, and I think we did make some pretty good headway with some agencies. I know that we spoke with the former director of the Office of Victim Services,
Hmm.
Elizabeth Cronin, when she was there, and we got the ball rolling on some work there. I know the Office of Children and Family Services has been doing a lot of work in this area, and so it's slow going, but it's progress.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that once it hits the tipping point, there's going to be no turning back, and and all agencies will eventually be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely picking up on a theme from you about the importance of leadership and leadership buy-in, and that, where you've seen movement happen is when you see those leaders kind of step up to the plate and really understand the importance of how this truly aligns with the goals most organizational leaders are trying to achieve. Like, right, being able to deliver high quality, high impactful services requires a staff that, can be who can do that. So you need staff who are stable in their positions and reduce the turnover, highly satisfied staff, and trauma-informed practices is really, I think, one of the ingredients that can surely help get organizations moving in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you get on the plane and they say, put the mask on yourself
Yeah.
before you put the mask on others. Um, we really have to do that. We have to do that. We can't ask people in the field to do certain things if we're not willing to step up and do them ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important aspects of this work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think just thinking about, especially in kind of where you are right now and the agency you're working for, we don't sometimes associate kind of, bringing trauma informed practices and with the intersection of justice. But I think, as you reflected earlier, these youth didn't just wake up and decide to do something that was going to get them in trouble with the law. Like, right, they have their own history, and so really understanding that and can be a game changer in how staff are and folks are approaching and working with these young people and their families.
Yeah, and really like the impact that it has on uh, adolescent brain development as well,
Hmm.
especially for the young people.
Yeah.
Um, when you look at typical development, in somebody who was not traumatized,
Hmm.
most of the time their mindset is in the cognitive state, with very little time in survival mode,
Right.
and the opposite when somebody has experienced trauma, especially in a child and a youth. Um, it impacts so many other aspects of their lives.
Hmm.
If they're trying to go to school and get an education and they've experienced trauma and they're sitting in the classroom, their cognitive state is not really the one that's taking prevalence there. It's
Right.
it's survival mode.
Yeah.
And so the ripple effect that it has on education and really behavior and
Hmm.
all those other things, it's something that we really do need to address and be aware of.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, thinking about just what you said for yourself and kind of how you were showing up at work during the times where you were kind of going through and processing your own trauma, and then thinking about these young people and their behaviors, it's bringing that curious mindset. Like, why might someone be acting or behaving or, responding in this way? Versus kind of that reactive kind of mindset of just like, what's wrong with them, and really making that fundamental shift can be that game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the hope is that, when there is somebody like that that's struggling, that they will eventually see that, that they want to go and get some help and
Hmm.
go through it, because um, you know uh, as professionals we can't force anybody to go through
Of course.
any processing of their own traumas or anything like that. And that's a difficult part of it too, is there may be people that don't really realize or understand that they've
Hmm.
been impacted by trauma. They don't know that they're being triggered and that their reactions are likely the result of trauma that they've experienced.
Hmm.
And, it's not something that any of us can basically tell them, you know
Right.
you should go and talk to somebody or whatever, but we need to provide that space
Mm-hmm.
for them to realize for themselves that,
Right.
maybe they want to go um, and take a look at what's going on there as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also just appreciate so much you sharing your personal story because it just shows like it's not too late. Like, right? Like, you were 29, I think you said, when you started to reach out and get some help and address what was going on for you. And it sounds like it made a huge difference for you and your life and your quality of life and where you are and shifting from the dark places to a brighter future. And I think it when people are in a place like you said, that dark place, it feels almost impossible. And so having kind of hearing that there's others who have been there and have gone through it, I think can be inspiring and spark that hope for someone who might not be able to kind of hold that for themselves right now.
For sure. And that's why I kind of do what I do, and I speak publicly about it. I've done advocacy for
Hmm.
legislation like the Child Victims Act and the Adult Survivors Act, and um, a lot of those various things that are impacting people,
Hmm.
because there is a hope that if I'm out there talking about it, and similar things may have happened to me that are happening to others,
Hmm.
and they see that you know somebody that has an ability to stand up and talk about it in front of others,
Hmm.
maybe it gives them an inspiration to kind of try to heal
Right,
themselves as
absolutely.
well.
So, as someone who I think has been one of the early adopters of this trauma informed movement and kind of a voice, a very vocal voice for it, what is kind of, if you had one kind of piece of wisdom that you'd want to share with someone who might be kind of earlier in their journey, what would you kind of share with them?
I would basically say, buckle up. It's hard work, but it's well worth it. You're going to come out the other side, and you're going to live a life that you never even imagined could be true.
I love that. I love that. So, Tom, I just want to thank you for sharing kind of your experiences, both personal and professional, in this journey and this work. I think there's a lot that you offered kind of our listeners for them to think about. So, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for joining us today. Please visit our website, traumainformedny.org, for additional trauma responsive resources, events, and training opportunities. Subscribe to our podcast to be notified when our next episode is released.